Welcome to the DrRcraft CSS Shadows tutorial. The CSS box shadow and text shadow properties allow creation of shadow effects around elements, frames, or text, and can add emphasis to certain areas of the page. As shown here, there's a white shadow around this red box and a black shadow this text. First, let's look at applying drop shadows to the frame of an element. Currently, we have a paragraph element on a page with a blue background color, some extra padding to inset the text, and a white text color. To add a drop shadow to the entire paragraph element, we can use the box shadow property. The box shadow property takes a couple of parameters. Firstly, the x coordinate offset. It can be a measure in pixels, 5 pixels to the right in this case, or a negative value to move it to the left, or for no offset, it can have 0. And the next parameter is the y offset, which is similar to the x offset, but it moves the shadow vertically instead of horizontally. Let's try adding 5 pixels to make it move slightly downward. And then we can add a color to it. For example, red. And you can see now there's a red shadow behind the element. You can even move the shadow a little bit more so you can see. Next, let's look at doing the same thing but for text. Adding a text shadow is pretty similar to a box shadow, but instead you use the text shadow property. So here, since the text is smaller than the element itself, you can make the pixel measure smaller. So 1 pixel to the right, and then -1 pixel, so 1 pixel upward, and then, for example, a black shadow, which is slightly difficult to see, so we can change the color, and now you can see a slight gold shadow behind this white text. Thirdly, let's look at how we can add a blur effect to our shadows. To add a blur to a shadow, you add a blur radius, which goes after each of these x and y offset values. 0 is the default blur radius, which is how it looks normally here. We can add a measure in pixels to add less blur or more blur to the shadow. And if we get rid of the offsets as well, then it'll look slightly better, as it looks like it's coming from the element itself as opposed to somewhere else on the page. Finally, let's try to add multiple box and text shadows. Multiple shadows can be added to the box shadow and text shadow properties, making use of comma separated definitions. And then we can add another shadow using the parameters we mentioned earlier. And a text shadow, you can make it gray this time. And now, as you can see, both the box shadows are in effect and both the text shadows are also in effect. This concludes the CSS shadows tutorial. Thank you very much for watching.